Recording's on. Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. It is week 2, day 4 of Python, and we have a lot of work to do today. So let's go ahead and get started with our algo. We have our algo for today. It's called if parens valid. Okay, it means if the parentheses in the string is valid. Okay, so what we're doing is receiving a string that has parentheses in it. All right. And just like when we type in code, an opening parentheses must have a closing parentheses. Okay. So they both have to have the proper opening and closing. And so when we read through the string left to right, we can see that one, we have an opening parentheses here, and the next parentheses is another opening parentheses. So far, that's still valid. A parentheses can be within one. Okay, can be nested. Then the following to this one here closes this parentheses that encapsulates this P. All right, so we have a close there, and then we have an opening again. And then we have a proper closing encapsulating this other P here. All right, sorry, 3, sorry. So this parentheses closes, opens and closes the P, open and closes the 3. And then lastly, we read this parentheses here, this closing, closes this one here that encapsulates everything from the uppercase Y to the lowercase s. Okay, so this is a valid one because all the parentheses here are opened and closed as we in a proper syntactical form, right? So this would here close this one. Everything that has an opening has a proper closing in the format that we'd expect. So this would return true. All right, now let's look at the second string. This is an example of a false. We should receive, our function should return false if our parentheses don't have the proper closing or opening, right? So this one here starts with an opening parentheses. That's fine. Another opening. Okay, that's fine as long as it has a close. All right, it does. It has this close here. But then what does that mean? That means we've reached the end of our string with a 3. We don't have a closing for this one, which means that this is a false. Not every parentheses is closed. Okay, so not every parentheses is closed. Every opening must have a closing. So in this instance, not every parentheses has been closed. So this would return a false. Okay, so let's see here. Do we understand so far what's going on? That an opening parentheses must have a closing. Let's look at this one, string 3. We have an opening here and then a closing. Okay, that's fine. But then we have a closing and then an opening. Here's the closing. What is it closing? Well, this one's already closed, so it's not closing anything in particular. It's just a stray closing parentheses. So this one here is false already. And it has 2 false things. This is opening and it's not closing anything. So all we need is a false for your function to return a false or true, a Boolean. And we don't need an explanation, but the explanation here helps us understand why it is a false. All right, one more here, and then we'll go ahead and distribute us to groups. String 4, we have a and then opening and then a closing and then a opening, or sorry, a closing, then an opening. So same as string 3. See, we have B is closed, that's fine, and then you have a closing, then opening. All right, one last poll here just to make sure you guys are all with me. Do you understand the objective for this morning? Okay, fantastic. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put us into groups. Stop the recording. All right, we're back, everyone. Thank you for your hard work on this algo. Let's go ahead and have a group present. I saw at least one group complete it, so let's go ahead and have some volunteers. Who'd like to go first?
I can present.
Great. Thank you, Simon.
Okay. Um, all right. So the way we figured this out, basically, we set up counts. So 2 counts. We have an open count and a close count. And then we have a for loop that's going to go through the string. And then we have a series of if statements in the for loop and out of the for loop that make sure it returns true or false based on the count. So the first if statement we have is if close count is greater than open count. So if at any time the close count is greater than the open count, that's not going to make sense because that means a close parentheses came before there were any opening ones. That's going to return false.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have an if the string if that element of the string is equal to an opening parentheses, it's going to add to the open count. If it's equal to a closing parentheses, it's going to add to the closing counts. Otherwise, it's going to start back at the loop. And then outside of the loop, so after it's counted everything, if the open count equals the close count, it's going to return true. And if it doesn't, it returns false.
Very nice.
And then I think, so this edge case wasn't in there, but I think we would have had to add another condition if like say the string started with a close. Actually, no, I think our first condition
Yeah, no, your first
would
condition.
figure that out.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, and so let's make sure. Oh, sorry, I have I didn't, so we wrote it on Mixie's computer, so I might not have copied it over correctly. But it does work, I promise. Mixie, do you want to share it and show quick?
Well, if you just want to comment out the Python code.
Python code is next one is line 60. So you might want to comment that out.
Yeah.
Oh, how'd that get there? Oh, that was just from when you sent it to me in the message. Okay.
Oh yeah. So highlight line 60 to below and then comment it out before running your JavaScript function. So
I think I just pasted this in the wrong spot.
Yeah. So keep highlighting and then yeah. There we go.
Sorry. Okay.
And then what runs your function? Where's the function call?
I think I just copied this in wrong. Function. It should be right here.
Yeah, it's right there.
Okay, there they are. Okay, so console log all four. All right, so you're console logging the function calls. And when you run it, what happens?
Yes. Oh, there we go. Now it's working.
Okay. Very cool. So we have one true. And let's go ahead. Let's look at those strings. And then make the first one false.
Here
we are. There we go. All falses. So it's working nice. And okay, fantastic. Thank you, Simon's group. Really like the solution. And does anyone have a different solution? Nian, did you want to present?
Oh, we solved it, but I mean the method is pretty similar.
Okay.
I mean the
Even
algorithm
if it's similar and it's written in a different way, it's okay to share because we can learn how it can be written differently.
Okay. So this is our methods right here. So we basically do the same thing. We make we make two variables to store the open count and the closing parentheses. And then inside the for loop, we just want to include all the cases that address the false statement. So we make the count. If we found the open parentheses, we make the count increment by 1, and similar method to do to find the closing parentheses. And then after that, we compare the number of closing counts and opening counts. So this one is to check the count. If the closing count is before the opening count, we just return false, and then we don't have to check any more at the end.
Mhm.
And then after the for loop, we check if the number, I mean the total number of open count and closing count modulo by 2 is not equals to 0, then it's false. So after all those cases pass, we have the true case.
Right,
And
because we have an even number of both, and
yes,
that's going to be
and
divisible by 2 and then get up to 0. So that's good.
and yes, true, false, false, false.
Very cool. All right, I have a similar answer to both groups. I want to present one real quick. It's very similar. The only difference is a syntactical difference, so a little bit less variables, but just wanted to show something cool here. Okay, so let's look at this solution here. We have just one variable, and we start it at 0. Okay, then we have a for loop. If we start with the correct one, then we add to our variable. Okay, that would add 1, right? But if we start with the wrong one, and if our count is also 0, right? Because if our count is 0 and we start with an open one, that means we had not added. If we see a closing one and our count is 0, that means we had not had yet an open one to add yet, right? So if we start with the wrong one and we also see our count is 0, which means we haven't added yet, then we return false. Otherwise, if we do have a number already there, let's say that means we would have found an opening one, then we say, actually, if we find a closing one, then just subtract 1 from that number. And so it will go back to 0 if there are an even number of opening and closing parentheses. All right, so that's what we're asking. If our number gets back to 0, then we have an even number of closing and opening parentheses. So if open less close count is equal to 0, that's going to return a true. If it's true, then we know then our string is true. All right, the amount of opening and closing parentheses is true. If we get a 0, otherwise, this equal sign is saying, is it equal to 0? If open less close count is not equal to 0, right? What does that mean? That means that we don't have an even number of opening and closing. So it's the same logic that we saw before, except now I'm just holding it in one variable, and I'm adding and subtracting from that variable to get that even number of 0. Okay, 0 is a baseline. For every opening, we add 1, and for every closing, we subtract 1. And so then we go back to 0 every time we have an even number of opening and closing. Okay, now let's take a nice break. Okay, we're gonna get into our lecture now, and we have a lot of stuff to review. So I'm gonna go ahead and set a timer. It'll be 10 minutes, and then we'll jump into today's content. All right? Okay.